I'll largely be addressing my questions to you, Ms. McClymont. And I think I want to continue on the thread from my colleague, Mr. Cooper, where he had left off in terms of the process by which Ms. Verschaeren was ultimately appointed as chair. I know you can say hindsight's always 20/20, that reflecting on her finding of guilt under the Conflict of Interest Act ×2, you can say, well, I guess we should have taken some lessons from that and perhaps reinforced the conflict of interest provisions within the hiring sphere. But I guess what troubles me, and I'm sure troubles Canadians, is that there were red flags all over the concept of even entertaining the thought of hiring Annette Verschaeren. Much communication happening from the past president and CEO, and nothing really was done. And I know, Ms. McClymont, you're relying upon the advice and basically saying we encouraged her to obtain information and advice from the ethics commissioner, and clearly she did. But the advice that she received from the ethics commissioner, she didn't follow. Not only she did not follow, but other directors did not follow. Hence, we're in this boondoggle of $390 million of taxpayer funds inappropriately being handed out to companies that were legally not eligible, and for directors basically patting their pockets. So this is leaving a real sour taste in the minds of Canadians as to what kind of shenanigans are going on with Justin Trudeau and his government. He told her point blank, not only do you have to declare a conflict, you must recuse yourself. She didn't do that. On the basis of that, she was found guilty ×2. So I want to go back to the process. You mentioned that there were under 10 applicants who were applying for this position. I want an actual number. And don't rely upon this as a privacy issue, because clearly it is not. I'm not asking for names. I'm asking for a finite number. How many people applied for the position of chair at SDTC?
Mr. Chair, as I've mentioned, there were close to 100 individuals who had applied for the chair position back in 2018.
You told me less than 10.
I was responding, Mr. Chair, I was responding to Mr. Cooper's question about the number on the advice letter that went forward. That was less than 10.
Well, let's go back. Over 100 applications?
Mr. Chair, I would clarify there were close to 100
Close to 100. Of that 100, you vetted that down to under 10. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay. What was the number under 10?
Mr. Chair, as I've mentioned, out of respect for privacy and
That's
personal
not good enough,
information,
Mr. Chair. I'll remind you, ma'am, of the supremacy of Parliament and the supremacy of this committee. The issue of privacy does not apply. I'm not asking for names. I'm asking for individuals that were mentioned in this referral letter that went off to the PMO and the minister's office. That is not a privacy issue. And if you claim privacy again, I will seek direction from the chair, because we have a right to demand that number and the documentation that flows from that. So I'll ask you again, out of respect, what is that actual number? I will not accept under 10.
Let me just interject here, just to assist the witness. So Mr. Brock is correct about privacy. Now, we're a long way from asking for any information from that. But I do think he is within his rights to ask for a number. Now, if you need to come back to us with that number, we'll accept that. At least that would be my recommendation. But I do think you need to provide a little more specificity, because there's a lot of numbers under 10. So if you would, please.
So, Mr. Chair, I appreciate your intervention. Our standard is that we don't divulge when it's less than 10. But I appreciate your offer to assess that and come back to the committee. So we will do that. We will check with our council and see if we're able to provide the number of names that were provided in the chair advice letter.
That answer is unsatisfactory. to me. She's taking this request under advisement and obtaining legal information, legal counsel as to whether she can release that number. Again, I repeat that this is not a privacy issue that can trump the supremacy of Parliament and the supremacy of this committee. I will be asking this witness again to provide that information to this committee, an actual number of individuals that made it on the referral list.
Yeah, I will function here at the direction of the committee now. It is my view that if you have that number, you should provide it to this committee. There is no, from this committee's point of view, there is no legal obligation for us to wait for a response. Out of courtesy, if you don't have that, that'd be one thing, but that's not the answer you gave. It is also unusual for PCO to appear before a parliamentary committee like this. These are unusual circumstances because of this board. I would urge you to provide Mr. Brock with that answer. It does not violate any privacy considerations that you might be under that we are not under. And again, doing so, I think, would be forthcoming to this committee, which I think you should be. It would also steer us away from the committee taking additional steps to require you to provide that information. So I would urge you to provide the number to Mr. Brock, please.
I'm not, to be completely honest, I'm not sure if I have the exact number with me. So I would like to, if, Mr. Chair, if it is possible, if I could just verify and we could get back to the committee with the number, if that's okay.
Is that just for clarity? Is that something you can verify in the next hour, or are you seeking? Okay, that'd be helpful. Thank you. So we'll look for that, and we'll deal with this before noon, Mr. Brock. Mr. Brock, I'm afraid your time is now up.
The number of witnesses we've heard with respect to this study and yourselves today, the general theme I'm hearing is you're all talking about a fair, transparent, a robust appointment process in the hiring of the disgraced former chair of the SDTC, Annette Verschieren. Clearly, it's a failure, and it's seen by Canadians as a failure. In fact, it shattered the trust that Canadians have in our public institutions. And on the issue of failure, I want to talk about another colossal failure that your office had an interest in, and that was the hiring of the new Human Rights Commissioner, Datani, and his anti-Israel posts that he made under a pseudonym during his grad school year. We know he was placed on leave, and then he ultimately resigned. Your office is responsible for vetting all federal appointments. Your office has acknowledged that a quote-unquote administrative oversight led to an incomplete background check. Now, to me, that means, whoops, we screwed up. Clearly, someone in your office did not do a thorough background check. On the minds of Canadians is, what is this going to cost us? When reporters asked the Attorney General, the Minister of Justice, Varani, his spokesperson replied, no comment, when asked whether or not Datani was paid during his leave or received a compensation package after resigning. So if the Attorney General and the Minister of Justice doesn't want to respond, I'm going to ask you, was Datani paid during his leave? And if so, how much?
Mr. Chair, I would just mention that we were here today to talk about SDTC, so I wasn't super well prepared to address this question, but Chair, if you're willing to allow it, I will do my best to respond.
Absolutely, yes, please do.
Mr. Chair, we did at PCO express regret that there was not appropriate, that this was an administrative oversight in checking the names, as the member has pointed out. and that we have taken measures to ensure going forward that there is clarity that that all names provided will be sent forward.
Ma'am, if I could stop you there, please. My time is very limited, as you know. You're not a first-time participant in committee processes. The question was very simple. Was he paid during his leave, and how much?
Mr. Chair, I would reiterate that in terms of personal information, I'm not in a position to divulge personal information about compensation provided to any governor and council appointee.
Chair, I'm going to be asking for your intervention again.
Just going to pause the clock here, Mr. Brock. I don't want to take your time as I do when I do intervene. So, again, I'd ask you to be as forthcoming as you can. This committee is seized with this, and I would expect that there could be. I'll hear in a second, Ms. Khalid. I'd ask that you be as forthcoming as you can with the minister, with the members' question. Should you refuse to do so, the committee could well delve into this further and request, which is a polite way of saying, call for that information to come forward one way or the other. I believe Ms. Khalid has a point of order. I'm trying to strike a balance here, Ms. Khalid. I'm not the witness. The witness knows why the witnesses know why they're here today to provide answers. It's not up to me to call for that answer, but I am urging them to do so. But I will hear you, please.
Thanks, Chair. I do believe, as the witness correctly pointed out, that she's here to speak to a certain topic, and the answers that are trying to be bullied out of her in this instance have nothing to do with the topic at hand. And I would request, Chair, that you obtain the decorum of this committee on the topic, because if we're going to go down this path, then, you know, there's so many other topics that we can ask our respected witnesses here today. I really think that we should stick to the topic at hand, and that is SDTC. We have spent a lot of time on this, and if we're going to go down this path, then I don't think that is helpful to what we're trying to achieve here, Chair.
So, as you know, I give members wide latitude to ask questions when officials are before us. Mr. Brock is certainly well within the bounds of his rights. This committee is seized with several investigations. So, of course, Ms. Khalid, that applies to all members. If there are questions outstanding for witnesses, they're not bound solely by the subject matter of the day. That's been a long established precedent. So, I'll turn back to the witness. If you're able to provide direction or an answer that is more forthcoming to Mr. Brock's. Let me just finish my thought, then I'll hear you. That is more forthcoming. The committee would certainly appreciate it. I know Mr. Brock would as well. But before you answer, I will hear Mr. Brock's point of order.
I'm asking that Ms. Khalid withdraw her derogatory commentary, that I provided a bullying question to this particular witness. I asked it in a very respectful manner. I pressed it, but that was not bullying.
So while I think this committee has conducted itself admirably today, I will hear from Ms. Khalid, and hopefully we can move on after that. Ms. Khalid, you have the floor.
Thanks, Chair. My comment about members opposite bullying witnesses was not specific to this witness. It is specific, well, it's general in terms of how I have watched and observed them behave towards all witnesses in this committee. So there's really nothing here to withdraw.
Mr. Brock, why don't we move on? I think the committee is to his. So, well, I'm going to start the clock here.
Yeah.
I would turn to the witness first, who has.
Thank you.
All right. So, you have the floor, please.
Mr. Chair, I unfortunately, I would reiterate that we're not in a position to divulge information of a personal nature surrounding any compensation paid to an individual governor and council appointee.
Let me just pause the clock. You've got a minute and a half left. So, Mr. Brock, you can you down this line? You've got a minute and a half left, or The committee can deal with this. We are going to committee business after the witnesses and propose steps for the committee to take. To me, your question is within the bounds. We can compel an answer, but I would think. I would say go back to questions, but it's your time, of course. You can act however you like. But I'll turn things over. You have a minute and a half, please.
Canadians want answers as to why the government saw fit to hire an anti-Semite, not doing any appropriate background checks. Canadians want to know how much taxpayer money went to this Mr. Datani while he was on leave. He resigned in disgrace. Most people, when they resign, do not receive a severance package or a compensation package. I understand in this case, the Government of Canada saw fit to offer him a compensation package. Canadians want to know how much, and I'll be asking the Privy Council office to provide details of how much the compensation was and how much he received while on leave.
You have 40 seconds.
Will the witness provide me with that information?
Mr. Chair, I would just continue to reiterate that I would not be in a position to provide personal information. I would say to the question on leave that that was what was in the public domain, that the individual in question was on leave. That would have been approved by the organization itself. And that is really the utmost that I could offer, Mr. Chair.